So you're getting ready to sign up for your next book event. Or maybe it's your first book event. Either way, there are some key factors to consider to make sure that you will have the best chance of signing up for an event that is going to be worth your time, energy, and investment, because some book events do cost money for table fees. Not all book events are created for all authors, and not all book events are created equal. And there's nothing that's more of a bummer than sitting at a table with no one showing up. Now, can you redeem the time by working on your next book with that laptop that you brought with you? Of course. Or you can scribble out ideas in a notebook, or you can just engage with local passersby and hand out freebies. These all work. But there's nothing better than going to an event where your stories connect with the people who are showing up and they can't wait to buy them. And sometimes, to be honest, you don't have any control over that. But with the 6 key factors I'm going to break down in this next episode, you're going to have your best chance of signing up for book events that are going to win for you and for the readers who get to buy your awesome books. This is Janeen Ippolito of Author Culture. Let's talk. Hey there, and welcome back, where we help amazing, ambitious science fiction and fantasy authors just like you achieve your sustainable success according to your life season in a chaotic publishing world. So if you're looking for ways to level up your creativity, your marketing, and your author life, all with encouragement and practical tips, you are in the right place. Now, I love me some book events. I have been to many, many book events over my lifetime, and I'm going to be going to many more book events. They can be a great way to establish a very personal connection with readers. They can be wonderful for networking with other authors. Plus, let's be honest, sometimes it's really nice just to get out of the house and get all of those books out of the bins that they're stored in and out to get some sunshine. Because books, they can get pale and pasty in those boxes in your cupboard or corner or wherever. They need to get a tan. They need to get some fresh air, maybe find some new homes. Okay, yes, I'm weird, but I'm also good at rehoming, aka selling my books. And I also do all of this on a limited budget and with limited spoons due to chronic conditions. So when I'm talking about these 6 factors, it's not just 6 random factors that I pulled out of a hat, but it's things that I actively consider whenever I am planning my own book schedule out for a new year and having to figure out where I can best spend my own time and limited energy reserves for the best potential impact. And that is something that I'm going to say here again. There are no guarantees that a book event will turn out amazing. There's also no guarantees that a book event will tank. There's a little bit of chance involved here. There's a little bit of risk. And depending on how much money you spend versus the amount of traffic that's going to come to the event, there can be a lot of risk. And that is something that you're going to have to figure out through trial and error. You can have all of your ducks in a row and a book event can go south. Or you can go to an event that has very little people coming to it and still sell a ton of books. Some of that is based on the kind of people that are coming to the event. Some of that is based on how well your books match up to the theme of the event. And some of that really comes down to the packaging and quality of your stories. So when you're thinking about getting good sales at a book event, I am assuming that your book itself has a good, solid story, a cover that correctly conveys that story in cultural, genre-specific terms that readers will understand. So this is not a matter where your rom-com is going to look like a thriller. We have the right cover for the right genre that's going to connect to the right reader. And of course, that you have a good back cover blurb that is going to engage people from the start. Those 3 areas are critical to connecting with readers and getting book sales. They're not going to be covered here. I might cover them in a future episode if you would like me to. So shout that out in a comment if that sounds fun to you. But assuming that your books are packaged amazingly well, they have great covers, great blurbs, and the story is solid, let's talk about those 6 factors that you need to consider before signing up for a book event. And these factors can help you to have the best chance to sign up for the right ones. They're going to be successful for you. First of all, you need to consider if this is a book event at all, or if it's a larger event that just happens to have an author's alley. And if it is a book event that only features authors, are these going to be authors in the same genre as you, or are these going to be just a kitchen sink full of authors who are all coming from different parts of the local area? It might seem odd, but actually going to an event that is on theme for your specific genre can help you with more sales rather than going to a big general event. And that's because it has a greater chance of attracting readers who are there for your exact books. Some people say, well, I don't want to be in a lineup with all these other fantasy authors. I feel like I'm in competition with them. If your books are solid and the outreach for the event is solid, readers will have money for more than one book. I mean, we've all been there, right? Like I've gone to book events all the time where I said, I'm going to get one book and I come away with 10. It happens. So the more that you can go to events that are targeted to your specific genre, the more you're going to find readers that are there to connect with that genre. That being said, even going to a book-centered event can be a way to connect with readers as well. Conversely, often authors will go to more broad events like a comic book convention for science fiction and fantasy authors. Comic book conventions often have an author's alley, or they'll put authors in with the artist alley, and they'll have a whole section devoted to books, but they're also going to have comic book artists there. They're going to have regular vendors. They're going to have other kinds of visual artists and other kinds of events at this convention. This can be helpful because it can bring in a much larger audience. You just have to understand that not everyone in that audience is there because they like books. And as a matter of fact, an author with a primarily word-focused literary collection of stories may not do very well at a comic book convention that is very focused on the visual arts, where it's people who are like, I read comic books because I don't like other books as much. I like the pictures more than I like all the words. So that's something else to consider. It isn't always the case, but I have gone to some comic book conventions where everyone was very kind. People who ran it were very kind, but the people who came, while appreciative of my books, would go right by me and buy 20 comic books because that's why they were there. So if you're looking at going to larger events, I recommend that you look at the overall traffic, how many people they're going to bring to the event overall, because the more people in general that are going to come, the more likelihood that a piece of them will be interested in your books. Look at the guests they're bringing. Are they all TV show guests and comic book guests and there's no authors there? That's another sign that you may not have people coming who are interested in your books. And look at the other authors in the lineup and see what kind of credentials they have. And if they're going to bring any audience there, or if it's going to just be a few authors kind of stuck in a corner. Now, some authors will also look at a writer's conference or another kind of conference and try to sell their books there. This sometimes works well because often authors are readers. However, the amount of people who go to a writer's conference can be on average smaller, which means that there won't be as many people who will possibly be interested in your book, period. And it may be a situation where they're more interested in networking with you than they are with buying your books on the table. So factor that in there when you're thinking about going to a writer's conference and trying to bring your books alongside. In some conferences, they don't even have a bookstore area that's available to everyone because that's not the goal of the conference. It's there to help you write better, not for everyone to sell their books. But even if it has that option, make sure that your books are going to be aligned with the genres at this conference and keep your expectations reasonable about your ability to sell, especially if selling your books at a table is not something that you have a lot of skill in or a lot of experience in. Now, of course, I have to bring up the craft show and the Christmas fair and all of those local sort of small town rural, but even urban shows where it's more about people coming with their crochet pot holders and their jewelry, and then you're there with your books. The good news about a craft show is that often the price per table is lower than at a con because these are outdoors. They're not having to rent out a whole arena. So that can be in your favor. However, if you are writing a science fiction or fantasy book in particular, and you are not writing for middle grade or a young YA audience, you can find it difficult to get sales because people are not coming to a craft show in general to buy books. Now, if you write for a middle grade or a younger YA audience, you can get sales because people will look at your books, especially often the female demographic will look at your books and will want to buy them for their kids or buy them for their grandkids or buy them for their nieces. And so if you have that middle grade audience or you have that young adult audience that's on the younger age range of that, we're talking about 13 and under, 14 and under, then you can do well at a crafts show. Otherwise, it can be a bit riskier. Alternatively, often the tables don't cost very much, so you have to balance that out. So factor one is what kind of event is it? Factor two is what is a theme? And we talked about this a little bit in the first factor, but it's worth repeating. If you have sci-fi thriller books with no romance, you're probably not going to find yourself at home in a romantasy fair. People aren't going to know what to do with you. Now, you might be thinking, waha, I can be that different, odd person out. Well, the first thing is the average event that's highly focused probably won't let you come in with a completely different science fiction or fantasy subgenre. Just throwing that out there. If they're carefully curating the event for the people coming, they're going to want authors who are also going to be part of that theme. But secondly, showing up as the oddball, while it can get you some sales and it can get you some interest, there's no guarantee of that. There's a higher risk of not connecting with people. And not only that, you miss out on the author networking opportunities because you're simply not writing to the same audience. So when you're thinking about the theme of an event, that's where you're going to look at the specific subgenres. What are the event coordinators promising to the people who come there? What kind of other guests are they bringing in? There was one event that I was considering that tends to bring in a lot of TV and movie guests. So initially I was a little bit skeptical, but some of their movie guests are going to be actors from the Twilight series. Now, they're not going to bring in Robert Pattinson, but they are bringing in some of the more well-known supporting actors. And because of that, there's a greater chance of people who enjoyed the books and enjoyed the movies coming in and buying other books. So that has my interest more than if they were bringing in just people who were in Back to the Future or those kind of things, where that's just more movie focused and there's no book tie-in. So when you're thinking about the theme of an event, you're thinking about what kind of genres are they looking to bring in. Look at the authors who've already signed up on their page. What kind of authors do those look like? What's their vibe? How are they trying to connect with others? What is the messaging on their website? You're going to look into those things and see if that aligns with the kind of themes you have in your books. Now, can you go to an event where the themes don't exactly match what your whole brand is? Sure, you can. I mean, I can't really stop you from doing anything you want to do. But understand that if you go to an event where the theme is drastically different than what your brand or books are promising, there could be lower sales, there could be a less chance for networking, and it just might not be as much of a fun time. Factor 3 to consider is the estimated amount of foot traffic. So is this event near a public place where there's going to be lots of people looking and browsing? Is it in a place that is away from public centers? So maybe there won't be as many people coming in. Is this a ticketed book event where it relies on the people who are running it to sell enough tickets to bring people into the event to buy books? These are all factors to consider when you're thinking about traffic. Now, this doesn't mean that a high traffic event with lots of people will get you more sales than a low traffic event. It also depends on the kind of people who are coming. Again, if you're going to a craft fair that is very, very high traffic, but it is very much advertised as a craft fair where you can buy lots and lots of fried food and Christmas presents and those kind of things, and there really isn't much of a showcase for authors at all, it doesn't matter how many people are coming there. They may stop by your booth, they may look at everything, but you're going to be more of a glorified museum exhibit that is a fascinating thing to look at than something they're going to want to pull out their wallet and purchase. So you have to think about that. Now, can you redeem those kind of events by having swag to give away and having freebie little cards that have a free short story on them? Absolutely. There are ways that you can win at those kind of events. But ideally, you want to go to an event that's going to have people there who actually are in some way interested in your book. Conversely, I have gone to far, far smaller events that were very, very targeted and had people there who really, really cared about fantasy books. And I have sold way more at some of those smaller events because people came there for those books and just bought everything versus people who kind of come to browse and go, that's interesting, that's fun, and then just go on about their day. So consider that. High traffic doesn't necessarily mean high sales. It can mean high sales. And especially if you're the kind of person who is very engaging and out there and wants to give away a ton of free bookmarks and talk to people, you can convert them into readers or at least make sure they have enough bookmarks so they check into your things later. But it takes a little more effort. So when you're considering book events, factor in traffic, but also factor in the kind of people who are coming in to look at your books. Another thing you want to consider is the length of the event. Is it going to be just for the afternoon, just for the morning, for the whole day, for a whole weekend, for 4 days leading up to a weekend? That can be quite a contributing factor because that's your time and energy that you're putting into this event. If the event has the potential of drawing a lot of your ideal readers, then you're going to want to make sure you have enough books for all the days of that event. You're going to have to set aside time. You may have to set aside funds for hotel fees. So when you're thinking about the profitability of this event, you have to look at the time and how much time you're going to be on your feet and how many days you're going to be on your feet and all of those elements just to see how that fits into your overall energy levels. For me in particular, I do have to look at how long an event is going to be and make sure that if it's going to be a couple of days, that I have a lot more buffer time on both ends to recover from that event. For those introverts out there, or even those extroverts who are just operating on lower spoons, you get me. So rather than getting into an event that just burns you out to a crisp, do a little bit of careful thought at the sign up phase and make sure that you can buffer enough time for recovery around a longer event. You're also going to want to look at the cost of the event. So it might be an event where the table fee is rather high, but you have a table for 3 days, so it evens out as long as your sales are good. But understand, the event can also cost a lot in terms of travel to get there, food that you're eating. Of course, you can just bring along jars of peanut butter and jelly and bread and some fruit and do it that way. I have done that in the past, so you can do that. But that can eat into your budget. You also have to think about marketing materials and making sure you have enough of those at your table. One thing that I actually do is that I signed up for a bunch of different newsletters for marketing materials. And whenever they have deals, I just keep aside a little bit of my savings and I just buy it right then. So if Sticker Mule has a huge sale on stickers, I can just grab them right when they have the deal from that account so that I can stockpile throughout the year rather than trying to make huge purchases right before an event, because that can be a bit of a drain on your budget. So when you're thinking about all of these factors, when you're doing an event, think about the potential cost of it. It may be a great looking event and it may have a lot of your ideal readers there. But if it's a longer event and it's farther away, you have to factor that in when you're planning on going there. In addition, you want to factor in how many books you're going to have to take there. How are they going to get there? Do they have to be shipped? And how many books you'd have to sell to make all of that back. Now, of course, can an event be more about the networking than the sales? Absolutely. But you need to go into there saying, hey, I may just barely break even, but I'm going to mindfully network and talk with other authors while I'm here and build future connections out of it. You have to go in with your game face on. And with that, factor number 6 is travel, which has gotten brought up in other factors as well. These things actually do all connect together, but for the sake of lists, I do like to have them all lined up in a row. But when we're talking about travel, you're talking about gas. You're talking about having to deal with any kind of inclement weather. You're trying to figure out if you might want to bring someone along with you to help run your table and to drive with you so that you're not driving by yourself. If you are flying, you have to figure out how you're going to get your books to the event, and you have to figure out shipping costs. And then if you have books to bring back, you have to figure out shipping costs for getting those books back to your home. So that's something else you have to figure out, especially if you live in more rural areas where you have to travel to bigger cities to get to events. The events might be very, very shiny, but does the cost of getting there eat up the potential of actually selling books at the event? That's something only you can decide. What I will say is the more awesome, well-packaged books you have on your table, the more potential you have of making back the amount of money you've spent and getting into profitability, because you simply have more different kinds of titles to sell, and you can sell bundles and you can sell adjacent materials, etc. So, in an unpopular view here, if you are a new author just starting out and you're super excited about going to all these big fancy events and being profitable, it really depends on your genre, your sales game, and how much you're willing to invest. Because even if you're at a massive, massive event, if you only have one kind of product to sell, aka one book, there's a certain cap on how much people can buy from you. Whereas the more books that you have and the more adjacent items you have, the more that you can engage with people and the more they can potentially buy from you if they like your books to begin with and if they're intrigued by your branding and etc. So I know it's really, really exciting when you get your first book out to go out to an event with a huge pile of your books and maybe expect to sell all of them. But depending on your branding and your marketing, oftentimes it's not as realistic as you might think. And I'd recommend sticking to smaller events starting out with that cost less so that you can get your feet wet going to events without breaking the bank. And then as you get more books out, you can go to bigger events and have more of a chance of breaking even and engaging with readers with your larger story world and not just with a single book. Now, of course, if you are a gangbusters seller and the book is super on genre and you were just ready and motivated to do it, you can absolutely be profitable with one book, but it does take more work and the odds of it happening aren't as likely. So always factor that in, especially newer authors, when you're considering signing up for book events. Now, bonus tip here. Can you team up with other authors for this event? Teaming up with other authors for book events can be fantastic for helping you manage costs. It gives you a buddy to drive there and back with. It gives you a buddy to help set up with. You can bolster each other as you run a table together. It can be fantastic. I'm a huge fan of this. I did this as much as I possibly could during my early author years. I'm not at a place where I can do it as much now simply because I have so many books and so much materials that I can't fit into half of a 6-foot table. I can't really even fit into half of an 8-foot table. I have tried, but there's only so vertical you can go before you hit the ceiling and the building inspectors get cranky. But as much as you can do this in the early stages of your author life, as much as you can split tables, especially with authors in adjacent genres, I highly recommend doing this. This can be a great way to help cut your costs, combine your strength together, have a buddy to encourage you, network, all of those beautiful things. Do it as much as you can. And even now, when I really need a whole table to myself, if I can ever split a booth with someone else, like a 10 by 10 booth, I absolutely go for that because it can be a great way to draw people in and connect with them. And even now that I can't split tables, I'll still say, hey, I signed up for this event for the table. You should also sign up and get a table so we can go together. So anytime you can collaborate with other authors and cut costs and have that encouragement and support, I highly recommend it. So authors, it is your turn now. Share some stories. What's the best book event you have ever attended? Are you a rebel who totally broke through one of my factors and sold out a ton of books at a craft fair? And maybe they weren't for middle grade or YA, but you totally sold like 100 books anyway? Or maybe you signed up for an event and found out, wasn't quite worth it, but you found a way to connect with people anyway. Share your highs, share your lows, share your wins, share things you've learned. I'd love to hear about it in a comment on the Substack post for this episode, on the YouTube video for this episode, or on social media. And if you found this super helpful and you know other authors who are going to be doing book signings and need lots of great tips to give them guidance and help them to have the best chance of success, please do share this episode with them. For now, this is Janeen Ippolito of Author Culture. Go forth and be awesome.